So good evening to those joining us from Kazakhstan and from Central Asia. Good afternoon, those of you joining us from Europe. Good morning, those of you in North America. Welcome to this webinar on open government in Central Asia, civic tech in Mangystau region of Kazakhstan. My name is Edward Lemon, President of the Oxus Society for Central Asian Affairs, and we're delighted to have you all with us today. This presentation is the culmination of a fellowship program that we launched in December 2021, so a year ago, called Promoting Knowledge-Driven Solutions by Strengthening Partnerships Between Academics and Activists in Central Asia. And the idea was to bring together academics and activists from Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, have them work in groups with mentors, go through a series of training sessions, and then produce policy briefs. And we had 9 policy briefs produced as part of this project. And one of the groups of our Oxus Fellows, a group from Kazakhstan, are going to be presenting their research today on civic technology in Mangystau region of Kazakhstan. We have opened up applications for the next round of Oxus Fellowships. And these will be a longer program, an 18-month program. We're going to extend the coverage to include Tajikistan. There are 24 places available. You can read about it on the homepage of our website. And all of the activities for the program, the training, the workshops, will be conducted in Russian, covering different topics related to youth, unemployment, gender-based violence, media literacy, urbanization, migration. The idea is to bring together academics and activists, have them work together under the supervision of mentors to produce policy briefs. We'll have small research grants also available to help fund fieldwork for these for research as part of this project. So the deadline for applications is coming up at the end of the middle of the month, December 15th, so just over 2 weeks away. And please, or exactly 2 weeks away, please apply via our website. You can find the details on the homepage. And so today we have a large group of speakers, all of whom but one were members of the Oxus Fellowship first cohort over the past year. But moderating today's discussion and presenting his own research on issues of digital governance in Kazakhstan will be Bahijan Kormanov, who is an assistant professor at the International School of Economics at Kazgu University, who's published widely on this topic. And so he'll be presenting his research and moderating today's discussion. But we're also going to hear from 6 of our Oxus Fellows. We have Igorim Bakhtiyarova, who's a doctoral student at Gumilyov Eurasian National University. We have Asil Kurmantayeva, who is a researcher on social innovation and a consultant on various development projects. We have Darjan Kazbekova, who is a PhD candidate over here in the United States at Syracuse University in their social science program. We have Marlan Negizbayeva, who is an associate professor at Kazakhstan National University, named after Al-Farabi. We have Mira Byesenova, who is a development communications consultant working with various international agencies, the UN, European Union, World Bank, and various other NGOs. And we have Janat Ubekbayeva, who is a digital education expert and founder of the non-governmental organization based in Aktau, Bilim Varene. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dr. Kormanov to talk about his research and to launch the discussion.
Thank you, Edward. So welcome, dear participants. It's great to see you all here today. And it's great that we can talk about open government in Central Asia. So just a second, I will share my screen and hopefully you see my PowerPoint. Yeah. So I will try to be brief because we have an exciting presentation that will be followed after that will follow my presentation on very interesting research in Mangystau. So I will try to focus on the research that was recently published in the Journal of Eurasian Studies. This article is based on my dissertation that I did at Graduate School of Public Policy at Nazarbayev University, and this article is co-authored with Dr. Colin Knox. So in this article, we try to investigate why authoritarian regimes try to adopt open government, but specifically we want to see how that open government, if that open government has empowered citizens in authoritarian regimes. And we are looking at the post-Soviet Central Asia, specifically 3 countries: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyz Republic. Post-Soviet Central Asia is a great place, if you want to investigate open government, because post-Soviet countries, they generally adopted e-government, digital government, and open government, and almost all countries have engaged actively in introducing smart technologies, being obsessed with all new and modern. So that's why my research brings light to this exciting topic. So what is open government? Yeah, when Edward was presenting my research, I would say that my major focus is not on digital governance, but on open government, which includes as digital and offline tools that promote citizen participation. There are different definitions of open government, as you can see on the slide. Generally, I prefer definition provided by the OECD that open government is a driver of inclusive growth, that form a foundation for inclusive institutions that in the end should provide better access to public services. Hence, open government is not just about open data, and it's not about digitalization of public services. It's about government being responsive to its citizens. So that is why in this article, we try to investigate how that reform was adopted in post-Soviet Central Asia, and at what stage Central Asia is located according to the framework formulated based on research conducted in that field. As you can see, if you look at open data, it's very easy, so to speak, a low-hanging fruit. You can easily publish information about state bodies, make laws available to citizens on different websites. It's very easy. However, open participation is a bit trickier because you need to create conditions for participation of citizens in policy formulation and public services formulation, providing them opportunities and actually considering their input, so it's not meaningless. And it includes offline and online. However, there is more emphasis on online in the recent decades because of the growth of technologies. So we take that into account. And finally, open collaboration means that experts, activists, citizens, they can collaborate with state bodies in formulation of programs and policies. It's like the highest form of open government that can be achieved. If we briefly look at the literature on open government in authoritarian regimes, we find 3 strands of literature. The first strand looks at how open government is used by authoritarian regimes for external legitimization and economic development. Open government can provide great access and visibility for authoritarian regimes to appear normal on global stage, to invite investors, and broadly to promote good image abroad. And if you have a board, you can go to the website of Turkmenistan e-government, and you will see that they have a very nice looking website with a very good English language website, specifically designed for foreign investors who want to invest in Turkmenistan. Second, open government could be used by authoritarian regimes for public sector reform and cooptation and involuntary participation of citizens. In this trend, I have decided to integrate literature on cooptation because, yes, open government tries to promote participation of citizens, but in authoritarian regimes, that means that citizens are sometimes co-opted and mobilized in such instruments and tools in a way that it is described as involuntary participation in the literature. Finally, there is a huge pile of literature on networked authoritarianism and information autocracies. Sometimes it's called also online authoritarianism. So there are many different names, but the idea is the same, that autocracies, they learn from each other, and we all live in the digital age. And different authoritarian regimes have learned from the events of the Arab Spring. They understand now that they have to control digital space and to monitor that would allow these regimes to enhance their rule in two major ways. First of all, they're able to identify potential threats for regime. Second, they're able to learn from citizen preferences, because as you know, in literature on authoritarian regimes, there is a problem called the dictator's dilemma, because in authoritarian regimes, citizens do not reveal their real preferences and interests. Hence, open government and different instruments of open government can allow citizens to understand preferences and moods of citizens. So in this work, I have conducted 47 interviews in 3 countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and I focused in particular cases of open government. I focused at the specific instruments that were created to promote open government in those countries. As you can see, I have interviewed both civil society activists and state officials. So in Kazakhstan, we look at the National Council of Society Trust. In 2019, when Tokayev came to power, he announced listening state, or слышащее государство, as one of his major concepts. As you can see, the idea was that the government is obliged to listen to its citizens and, most importantly, to hear them. And that National Council of Society Trust, or UTKNES, it was created to promote open participation and collaboration. The idea was that activists would be selected to that National Council, and then they would collaborate together with the president and president's administration and ministers as well. They have created working groups and would introduce some legislation that is more responsive to needs of citizens. Second, we looked in Uzbekistan at citizens' virtual receptions of the president. It was one of the major reforms of Mirziyoyev in 2017 when he announced the Year of Dialogue. So that reform, that platform created at the president's website became hugely popular. And initially, citizens started to issue their complaints, started to send their complaints about the work of state bodies in Uzbekistan. So it is a major open participation tool. Finally, in Kyrgyz Republic, I have investigated how country joined the Open Government Partnership in 2017, the only Central Asian country to join that partnership. And the country adopted 2-year national action plan. And I look at how that national plan was implemented. And so based on the analysis of interviews, I was conducting semantic analysis. So I coded data, created categories, and then created themes. And you can see slide with major themes from semantic analysis. So based on interviews with activists and state officials, we have identified 5 major themes institutionalization and cooptation of citizen activism. So authoritarian regimes used open government for purposes of cooptation of citizen activists in the instruments that were made by those regimes. Yeah. Second, networked authoritarianism. So there are elements of how state officials from Astana to Tashkent to Bishkek, how they try to monitor and use different tools of information autocracies to control and promote government message. There was a theme of imitation of open government reform, which means just mimicry without really providing ground for citizen empowerment. So that reform didn't result. Yeah. Fourth is economic development, digitalization, and public services. And finally, resistance of state to be responsive to citizens and also state bodies. So in our findings, we see that in Kazakhstan, for instance, the state has abused open government to control citizen participation, masquerading as an open government reform. So that National Council of Society Trust was used by Tokayev to mobilize his, let's say, supporters. Members of National Council Society Trust were selected by President's administration, and the meetings were highly orchestrated and tightly controlled by President's administration and by Tokayev himself. And they were used to explain, disseminate, and promote government message to members of National Council. So then they would explain it to citizens. So like in the old Soviet times here, they did it at CSD. So second, the Uzbek state has facilitated the creation of relatively free digital space and responsive platform. However, during my interviews, I have uncovered that once citizens started to articulate their needs to social media, the Uzbek authorities pulled back, and that initial success was neglected by state bodies providing formal responses or отписка and not being responsive to citizens. And finally, Kyrgyz state has been able to thwart the best intentions of open government. So Kyrgyz state bodies were reluctant to implement initiatives out of National Action Plan. Actually, only 2 initiatives out of 20 were implemented, despite the significant drive and motivation from very independent and high capacity civil society sector in Kyrgyz Republic. So what we say is that there is not much progress with open government in Central Asia. We do have to admit that there is some achievement with regards to open data and electronic delivery of public services and e-government, but we come to a conclusion that it has not resulted in the realization of open participation and collaboration. Rather than empowering citizens, the Central Asian states have institutionalized and engaged in cooptation of citizen activism. So there is a facade of openness and freedom to express one's opinion, but a simultaneous, cynical, and sometimes sinister opportunity on the part of the state to violate the rights of those they perceive to criticize and threaten the status quo. So basically, authoritarian regimes in Central Asia have adopted open government for their own purposes, for regime survival, but it has not empowered citizens. So on this optimistic note, I want to pass the floor to our next presentation and to our researchers, to Mangystau. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So while our presentation is being set up, so let me to greet you in Kazakh. Welcome to our discussion about the civic tech in Kazakhstan based on the Mangystau region. It's really hard to promote the civic tech after optimistic conclusion of Bakhjan, but let me try to do so. maybe, well, because maybe the civic tech can be considered one of the ways available to somehow get involved into the public dialogue. So let us introduce, oh, can I scroll? So let us introduce our amazing team, Oxus Fellows 2022. We met within the Oxus program that promotes partnership between academia and activists in Central Asia. My name is Mira. I'm a development communication specialist. Ladies.
Good day, everyone. My name is Janat. I'm a researcher based in Mangystau, Kazakhstan. I'm also a founder and director of a non-profit, non-governmental organization, Bilimbernia.
My name is Marlan Negizbayeva. I am associate professor at Al-Farabi Kazakh National University.
Hello, everyone. My name is Darjan. I'm a PhD candidate at Syracuse University.
Hi, everyone. My name is Asel Kurmantaeva, and I'm a researcher and a consultant on social innovation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aigurim. I'm a Master of Social Sciences, PhD student scholar, and a specialist in international relations. I'm glad to welcome all the participants attending today's webinar, and I hope to have a fruitful collaboration with you. Thank you.
As you can see, the background is different, but what unites us is a passion for changes, for positive changes through the possibly civic tech in our case. So can we switch the slide? Yeah. So having realized that we have different audience here, students, well, especially for the students, I would like to highlight the benefits of the developed civil society. Yeah, so we know that democratic states support the development of civil society, and this approach justifies the best expectations because this approach contributes to democratization. It accelerates political and economic reforms. The state, ideally allowing citizens to participate in the public dialogue, actively involves them in managing the affairs of the state. When it delegates its powers and functions to the civil society, it can finally get focused on its mobility, efficiency, and finally they can focus on providing better public services to the population. So as Bakhatjan mentioned, President Tokayev announced about the building Jana Kazakhstan, New Kazakhstan, and he keeps highlighting the role of the civil society in building the hearing or listening state. But the question is, are the citizens really empowered? Are they equipped enough to be heard, to be listened? Next, please. So if we talk about the problems, about the development problems, corruption comes to our mind as one of the first of them. Yeah, there are many controversial failed projects, and the construction of the LRT, light railway transportation system, is one of them. So people even sadly call it the monument to corruption. But the question is, should we blame only the government for such doubtful decisions? Or what is the role of the civil society in preventing such bad decisions? Yeah. So next, please. So let me once again remind you about the civic tech as one of the possible tools to get engaged into the decision-making process, because the civic tech, it's an IT solution for social problems. Yeah, it focuses on citizens. Ideally, it focuses on citizens. It helps to develop engagement, yeah, and encourage citizens to act for the public good. If we highlight the benefits of it, it helps citizens to connect to each other, to speak to the government, it empowers citizens, yeah, and drives social changes. So just to highlight two main functions, the first function of the civic tech is classic functions is to improve the communications between the government and citizens. And the second one is to involve the citizens, the civil society, into the decision-making process. There are many definitions of the civic tech, but here you can see the source of the definition we've been using in our context. And actually, in our work, we refer to the tools of the open government as to the civic tech. Thank you very much for your attention. And Dajan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mira, for your brief but insightful introduction about the civic engagement in Kazakhstan. While civic engagement is a very challenging and demanding trend, and in some countries we have already different types of civic engagement, to understand its level and rationale in Mangystau region was one of our research goals. So next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide, I would like to talk about the situational analysis. This analysis allowed us to map out the causes and effects of low participation of citizens in the decision-making processes. As you can see, corruption, a lack of transparency, and nepotism are one of the reasons leading to low civic engagement. And this analysis helped us think about how we can break this vicious circle and what can be the solution based on our example of the Mangystau region, which is one of the most complicated regions in the country. In the next slide, you can see methods that we decided to apply. Next slide, please. So, of course, taking into consideration dilemmas such as a limited time frame of around 3 months, working as a group of 6 members, operating online only, a selection and application, the right combination of methods was highly important. So in this research, we used a mixed methods approach, and Mangystau is a case study. So we conducted online survey and in-person interviews as our primary source of the data collection. And as secondary sources, we analyzed the information on the Open Government digital platform and Aktau Akimats, which is a mayor office website. Specifically, we analyzed the People's Participation Budget Program. So by analyzing 2 platforms, we tried to understand civic engagement into local governments and how people are engaged in the distribution of resources. So we applied the Alchemist software to conduct and analyze this survey. We had 30 interviews. We had 1 reminder from April to May. So the questionnaire were distributed in Kazakh and Russian among employees, beneficiaries of non-governmental organizations in the region. We also published and distributed this survey on social media networks such as Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp chats. Next slide, please. So you can see in the next slide some of the questions that we used to determine, first of all, the level of civic engagement of Mangystau residents in local governance, reasons for their active or passive participation in local governance by using these 2 platforms that I mentioned before, and main barriers to public participation in the decision-making processes at the local level. So we interviewed 4 people, NGO representatives and region residents, and the interview questions included the importance of digital platform in increasing citizen participation. We also asked about the reasons behind the passive or active participation. We also tried to assess the digital literacy level of the population and actually the ways how to eliminate the existing barriers. Also, the questions touched upon the role of governmental agencies and NGOs in the participation of citizens in the decision-making process at the local level using digital platforms. Thank you. Janat, please, your turn.
as a resident of Mangystau region myself, I would like to give you some background information on the region, which will in turn explain why we decided to focus on this part of the country. Can we please switch the slides? Yes, thank you. So aside from its important geopolitical location, Mangystau region is mostly populated by the Adai tribe, which is a part of a lesser Jews, and is perceived by the rest of the Kazakhstan as temperamental and rebellious. The region's economy is heavily reliant on oil extraction industry, and Mangystau is one of the few donor regions to the state budget. Despite of generating relatively high GRP, the region is crippled by various resolvable social problems that over the years fueled social unrest in the region. I grew up in Zhanaozian and currently reside in Aktau. Both of these cities made international headlines with the Zhanaozian oil strikes of 2011, which ended very tragically, and with January 2022 events that took root in this region and rapidly spread throughout almost the entire region, the entire country. We wanted to look at whether and how relatively high public engagement of residents of Mangystau region transmit into civic technology. Next slide. Next, I would like to give you some demographic information on our research participants, on the respondents. So they were mostly young. As you can see, over 80% of them are between ages 26 and 35. Majority were women. Almost everyone had higher education, and half of our respondents even had graduate degrees. Almost all participants were urban, from Aktau and Zhanaozian, and half of them were married and had children. Our survey and interviews also showed that our respondents were very highly informed on local problems. So as you can see, we asked them to rank or identify some of the problems of the region, which they did. The drinking water problem, cost of living, healthcare, unemployment, environmental issues were ranked top 5 problems of the region. If we look at civic engagement examples globally, we can see that such cohort of young, highly educated, and well-informed citizens should be the drivers of social change. However, our findings showed a different story. Next, please. Our findings show that 90% of our respondents reported not being civically engaged. Well, we looked at public engagement through civic technology, and especially through open government tools. And here I wanted to quickly list the tools that we asked about and what opportunities of civic engagement they give. So we looked at eWitness, which is a platform where citizens can make requests, leave feedback, report violations to any governmental agency. They can do it electronically. Open Budget is a platform where citizens can monitor and participate in the formation, distribution, and spending of local budget funds. Open Dialogue is a platform where citizens can interact with relevant governmental agencies and participate in decision-making processes through online discussions and surveys. Open Data is a platform where citizens can freely access public data. Open Normative Legal Acts is a platform where citizens can discuss and vote for or against decrees before they are signed. And Evaluation of Effectiveness of Governmental Bodies is a platform where citizens can access evaluation of effectiveness of certain governmental bodies. And 70% of our respondents, of our highly educated, well-informed young respondents, reported not being familiar with these digital platforms. Next. Another very important and quite recent civic civic technology is people's participation budget. It is a platform where annually citizens or residents of Aktau city can unite into associations or communities and propose an idea to improve the life or infrastructure, or to solve a certain problem using local funds. So, and when we analyzed this platform, we saw that some projects were funded in Aktau in the last couple of years. For example, a workout space was built, a soccer field, a children playground. However, each of these projects proposals, they received as few as 2, 3, or 4 votes. For a population of Aktau city, which is almost 200,000 people, it is a very low number. The maximum of votes was 64, which is still low for such a city. Another thing we looked at was a state procurement website where you can monitor and make sure that state procurement is done transparently and without corruption. And almost all our respondents never visited that website. Next. One interesting explanation, potential explanation to this problem was that in Aktau city, there is an unofficial Telegram chat channel, which was created with the initiative of our regional Akim, governor of Mangystau region. And as you can see, this Telegram channel is quite popular. It has over 12,000 users, and people report problems problems in such a way. I will translate this for you. For example, people here in this chat are asking, when will we have when will we have clean water? Because water's color is like this, and below I put it in the green. One of the Akimat employees replied that we will attend to this issue promptly. Also, in the corner, in the below right side corner, you will see I circled that in 2 weeks period, this chat receives over 20,000 messages, which is good. But we think that this is one of the unofficial channels that drives away traffic from official civic technology. Okay, thank you. Next.
Thank you, dear Janat. Let me take your turn. Let me continue to make some important points on the barriers in this current slide. And according to our research, interestingly to know that most of our respondents in our research are not familiar with the Open Government Platform and civic technologies at all in Mangystau region. And we wanted to know and reflect the reasons of this, and the reason of it is linked to the following barriers. The first one is about the failure of the city administration to inform the citizens about the possibilities of participation in local governance. Next one is the distrust of local authorities. By the way, distrust of authorities is a problem not only within the framework of the object of our study, but also in many areas in Kazakhstan. Next one is the citizens do not have enough time and energy for civic engagement. This is the motivational factor. Next one is the lack of skills among the population.
Sorry for disturbing you. Could you please finish up the presentation in 2 or 3 minutes here, because
yeah, I know. Thank you. Yeah, I see the chat. Thank you. Yeah. And the last one is the local NGOs do not organize events for the development of civil society. So in our view, the further strengthening of civic technologies as a mechanism of productive interaction between the local authorities and the population will increase or will impact the effectiveness of the hearing state concept we're having now in Kazakhstan. And based on our research, we propose the following recommendations in order to prevent the barriers we have previously mentioned. The first point is the digitalization. So for the acumen of the Mangystau region and its cities, districts, and villages, it is important to simplify the interface of the existing open government portals for the convenience of users. So both citizens and civil servants themselves. Next point is the communication. It is important to inform public about existing opportunities to participate in local governance on a permanent basis. This recommendation is mostly addressed for local executive bodies. Next important point is the funding point, to increase funding and ensure healthy environment for local NGOs and civil servant organizations. This recommendation is addressed to the local executive bodies. So we think that it could help to increase transparency of the existing state social contract infrastructure. Last one is the capacity building. We think that among our recommendations, it is important to develop capacity of local executives to effectively interact with the public and local NGOs to increase activity on digital platforms. To sum up our recommendations and barriers, we think that these sounded recommendations could help to prevent all the barriers people are facing in Mangystau region now. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for your great presentation. And I think now I will moderate this discussion. And since we talk about open government, we actively welcome open participation from our participants. And I believe some questions were raised in a Q&A session. So I will one of the questions was I will try to add to sound the questions as they were provided. So the first question was, what is the difference between civic tech and government tech? So I guess that question could be addressed to you. Yeah, Mira was raising hand. Yes.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, it's a very good point, because there was a big event which is called Digital Bridge event in Astana, and the Minister of Digitalization, he referred to the open government, to the eGov, as GovTech. Actually, they were presented GovTech, MedTech, AgroTech, all kinds of tech, but civic techs were not presented. And here's the question about the definition. Of course, as I mentioned, there are many definitions, but ideally, those civic techs have to be initiated by the civil society. In our case, the government of Kazakhstan monopolizes this field, and it launches the civic tech. And the compromise is that the open government, the eGov platform, probably can be called the government-led civic tech. The difference, once again, is that the civic tech, the beneficiary of the civic tech are citizens. The beneficiaries of the government tech are government officials. So all software, all digital tools they have and use inside the government in their office, they are called GovTech. So and I think that we can bravely refer to the open government tools as government-led civic tech. Yeah, thank you. I hope that I answered the question.
Yep, thank you, Mira. I think it was a great response to the question. I could just add that in Central Asia, there are some examples of civic tech. For instance, in Tajikistan, there was one project called Momit-Avanem. It was organized by local civil society organizations, Soros Foundation, and it was supported by mayor of Dushanbe, but it was accomplished 10 years ago when Tajikistan was in a different place than today. So there is a question by Nancy Lubin. She's asking me, so the first speaker, how international assistance efforts have exacerbated the problem. Yeah? So to speak, there are donors and different international organizations like World Bank, IMF, and they promoted new public management reforms in Central Asia. And within new public management reform, they also promoted new public governance reforms, which is connected to new public management. The idea is that you need to treat citizens as customers, you need to be responsive, and you need to digitalize public services. So if you think about it on the surface, it looks great. So you digitalize, you become more responsive, but if you focus just on technological aspect, you do not get the essence. Like Mira explained in her previous response, there is a difference between government tech and civic tech, and especially in authoritarian regimes. So government tech is totally controlled by government and could be used for different purposes rather than civic tech. And so that international assistance efforts were aimed mostly at supporting government tech rather than civic tech, except maybe for some outliers like the case of Mohamed Avanem in Tajikistan. It was a platform at the city level in Dushanbe that focused on problems with utilities, but then it was very popular. They talked about all different problems in Dushanbe. So let me see other questions. Just a second. Mirjan Shadenov is asking, what could be done to increase the ability and skills of usage of digital platforms? So I address this question to you, my colleagues. Who wants to respond?
Can I respond to this question, please?
Yes.
Thank you. This is the very important question which have analyzed within our research. And if you have heard me before, among our recommendations, we addressed the main, one of the main and important point to the local executive bodies. This is the to help to NGOs to organize informational and knowledge platforms in order to help people's, exactly the adult people, to take part in the decision-making processes. So in this point, I think that capacity building is a main point. It is said before that we should develop capacity of local executives to effectively interact with the public and local NGOs to increase activity on digital platforms. We have, as my colleagues have said before, there are so many problems between which the communication collapse is the main problem. So if we can solve the communication collapse, if we can solve the motivational factor for the citizens to take part in the decision-making process through the organizing of knowledge platforms, I can think that we can solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Aydirim, for your response. Yeah, yes, and capacity building is critical. It actually was one of my policy recommendations out of my dissertation, especially capacity building, yes, of citizens, but also like you need to increase capacity building of street level bureaucrats as well, those who work with citizens. There are, I see more questions. So there is a question by Jeff. There is a question by Daria Abdrahmanova, but I guess Mira already responded, unless she wants to add something. Are there any projects in Kazakhstan which promote the civic tech?
Actually, yes, there are. Well, I can name at least one of them, which is called the EU-funded project, Your Voice Matters, Civic Tech Solutions for Decision Making. They started their work at the beginning of this year, and actually I got inspired by the Civic Tech by participating in that project. The project's name is Your Voice Matters, Civic Tech Solutions for Decision Making. And just to add to my previous reply, of course, there are examples of the Civic Tech in Kazakhstan as well. There are, the projects initiated for environmental activism, for preventing violence. Yeah, so the apps initiated by the activists and so on.
Thank you, Mira. And I can add just one comment that there is a growing digital activism and virtual civil society. Though I cannot call it tech, but people organically, without government assistance to control, they collaborate and cooperate on different issues, from animal rights issues to like police reform in Kazakhstan, or to issues of demolition of housing in Tashkent. So, but like, of course, I'm not sure if it perfectly fits academic definition of civic tech, because it's done on the Facebook groups, on WhatsApp chats, and Telegram groups. But still, you see people, like organically discussing different issues related to state and public services. So there is a question by Jeff Bell. Is it possible for grassroots NGOs and activists to develop and promote civic tech under authoritarian conditions? What can civil society do to promote civic tech in Central Asia under current political condition that they are not currently doing? I guess we could jointly answer that question, briefly. So under authoritarian conditions, it is possible to have citizen activism, and that is also one of conclusions based on my dissertation. There is a growing virtual civil society in Central Asia. It is different from Western understanding of civil society. It does not necessarily contest the state. It could be co-opted sometimes, but it doesn't mean that it's fully controlled by state. So it's a bit beyond our classic understanding of contestation, and our stereotype is that autocrats and dictators easily control government organized civil society organizations. That could happen to traditional civil society organizations, but if we talk about less formal NGOs, more like associations, and especially virtual groups, I see that there is an opportunity for such grassroots organizations to promote civic tech and to really articulate the interests of citizens and their groups. And if you want to add to that response, it would be great.
Thank you.
May I add, if you don't mind? So that's actually a very tricky issue, because President Tokayev, once again, he announced his program. He announced that we are building the hearing or listening state, and he kind of promoted the online petitions, in 2019. So officially, he is very supportive of involving the civil society into decision-making process. And actually, what can the grassroots NGOs do? They can inform about the existing mechanisms for a dialogue, and some of them are really doing that. For example, the Eurasia Foundation in Central Asia, they, as I just mentioned, they implement the project Your Voice Matters, and I believe that the civic tech actually is kind of bypass way, to the democratization in our political reality, because we are allowed more freedom digitally than offline. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Janat is raising her hand, so please could you join the response and discussion?
what I wanted to say, but as a leader of a grassroots organization myself, I wanted to say that we cannot create an alternative for civic engagement. All we can do is we can help civil society to hold government and local governments accountable through the existing civic technology. And one of our recommendations is to especially do it with those with marginalized communities, for example, ethnic minorities, or those who are located in a district of our country where there's a bad internet connection, where they don't have devices. So yes, all we can do is we can raise awareness, we can help our citizens to really hold government accountable for their actions through the existing technologies. That's it. And also one of our recommendations was, as you know, grassroots organizations and NGOs do need funding for that. And government does provide funding for that. But what's controversial is, so they provide funding for developing civil society, but they control it and they almost like prescribe you what you have to do, also to suit them. So it's a controversial issue.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you, Zanat. And I really liked your point with regards to representation, the interests of marginalized groups, because in Kazakhstan, open government and e-government is available for young people who have access to technology, who can register and install NCA layer and have electronic signature if they want to send a request. But what about how can we say that really like old people, people who don't have access to computer or internet, digital divide issues, generational issues, so a huge chunk of our population is being left out. And also people groups who are marginalized for different reasons here. So it is essential to represent their voice and so that they can participate in government. Yeah. So so the next question is by someone called ST. So the question is related to the methodology. I guess it is related to your research, dear colleagues, that the participant is asking with regards to internal validity and like how did you choose sample? What was your sampling strategy for your research? So could you please respond to the question, explain your methodology? Thank you.
Sure. That's a really good question. So, but as I already mentioned, using all these concerns related to time frame, we had, as I said, 2 to 3 months only. We decided to use the mixed methods to do this, at the same time data collections by analyzing platforms and by reaching out people. So we were only online. We worked only online, and of course, it's not a good. It's not enough represents the Mangystau region, but still reaching 4 representatives of from as residents and NGOs, and as well having 30 respondents from interview from survey. It's already gives us a feedback, not the whole picture, but already a feedback. So again, it's a time frame, and yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Darjan, and I believe we are out of time. So could we please? I would like to pass floor to, I guess, Edward here for final thoughts.
Thank you, Bahija, and thank you all for attending this important discussion. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, really reflecting, I think, the success of our initial cohort of fellows that we managed to bring together such a great group of researchers working on a topic that I think is becoming, as the panelists have reflected, much more relevant for the whole region, and particularly for Kazakhstan, as the government under Tokayev charts this path of a new Kazakhstan and the need to hold them accountable, as we said, to their different promises and play a role in governance. So I'd like to thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to remind those of you in the audience who are interested in applying for the next round of fellows, who want to be in this position in a year and a half's time presenting to a global audience, please apply. Please go to our website and see the criteria for applications, and please join our society here at Oxus. So thank you all for participating, and have a good rest of your day or evening.
Bye. Thank you.